Hi there, welcome everybody. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today. We are running our June session of Feeling the Pulse 2024. My name's Eloise. I'm joined by my colleague Murray and our speaker Lindsey Gray. So this is a monthly learning exchange we have for community housing providers in the sector. And we love sharing information all around the sector about investment and growth activities. It's a learning exchange, so we really welcome you to ask questions and get involved. And some quick housekeeping, the session's being recorded for distribution purposes. So yeah, just keep your camera off if you're not comfortable with that. But otherwise, yeah, feel free to put all your questions into the chat. And yeah, keep your cameras on so our presenter can see you. Before we go much further, I wanted to acknowledge that I'm dialing in from the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara people in Meanjin, and like to send my deepest respect to elders past, present, and emerging. And quickly about the Community Housing Futures program, it's a program that's led by the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Housing Queensland, Community Housing Industry Association Queensland, and Q Shelter, our peak bodies. I think a lot of people here are pretty familiar. We're in the process of waiting to hear about iteration 2, so we don't have too much of an update for you today. So we're just going to jump straight into the presentation. And yeah, I'd love to introduce Lindsey Gray, who's joining us today. She's the project director of Bridge Housing. And today she's going to talk to us about renewal in the inner city, specifically looking at a really amazing project that she's been working on for over 6 years in Redfern in Sydney. So yeah, I'd love to hand over to Lindsey. Over to you.
Thank you, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen.
Just while you're getting that ready, Lindsey, if I can just quickly jump in. If anybody has any audio challenges or screen challenges, if you can just pop your digital hand up for us. And also at any point, feel free to throw any questions in the group chat and we can get back to you sort of towards the end of the preso. But if you have any great ideas, Lindsey's got a lot of awesome things that she's going to share with us. So feel free to pop that in there and we'll moderate that as we go. Thanks, Lindsey.
Thanks, Murray. I'll just like to acknowledge I'm actually in Sydney on Gadigal land, and I was born on Ngunnawal land, grew up on Darug land, and have now settled in Gadigal land. This project that is primarily the subject of the presentation is located in Redfern, and it is such a significant urban historical location for Aboriginal community members. It's been a really key driving element of the project. We are delivering 350 homes here, and over 15% of those will be specifically for Aboriginal households, which is over 50 homes, which is a really significant contribution to this community. And it's a really just a wonderful historical, contextual environment that I get to work in at Redfern with such a rich history of support services as well. I'm just going to make sure this is testing me. So here is our site shown in red, and it was a really nice view. Actually, I might go back here. This is the site here. It's an entire street block in Redfern. It is directly opposite Redfern Oval, which is the heartland actually of where South Sydney Rabbitohs were started. They no longer train there, but it's a very significant NRL oval within Sydney. It was the location of where Paul Keating in the 1990s gave the Redfern Address, and the first time really acknowledged treatment of Aboriginal people in Australia and historical treatment. So it's a highly significant location. It's also in the middle of 3 social housing estates in the inner city. So we're 2 kilometres from the CBD of Sydney, just south of Sydney. And we are surrounded by over 5,000 social homes. Just within the 8 street blocks surrounding the site, there's over 1,500 social homes. Waterloo, which is a major renewal estate location, is only 500 metres away with another 2,000 social homes, and Surrey Hills is slightly further north. So contextually, we are in, a location that's had a lot of concentrated disadvantage. They're all 1950s, 60s, 70s estates, so they're aging, and they come with, a lot of social issues that come with concentrated social housing like that. But we are also, if I point with my mouse, if you can see it, there's a street here called Great Buckingham Street where properties sell for $3 million every day of the week. So we are in a suburb that's highly gentrifying. It is evolving and changing and very high demand for market housing. But we are right on the edge. So this being our site, we have social housing surround, but we are, 200 metres from a street with very significant affluence. So the project at, it's called Elizabeth Street, Redfern. The project at Redfern includes 339 homes. The structure of the project includes a mix of all forms of housing. So there's market housing, key worker housing, which is subsidised but not to the same extent of affordable. There's social housing and affordable housing and specialist disability accommodation. So there's 3 separate buildings, and the 4th building is a community facility. So the site at the moment, which I might go back again, the site at the moment, 2/3 of it is vacant. Just over 10 years ago, 18 homes were demolished here that were part of that older social housing estate. And this building here is, it's called a PCYC, it's like a YMCA, but associated with the police force, a very small aging community facility. So as part of the project, the renewal includes a new community facility, which we're working with the PCYC to operate that in the future. So it is a significant increase in density, going from 18 homes that were demolished up to almost 350. And as I said, 15% of those will be for Aboriginal households. So Bridge Housing, sorry, I've kind of just dived straight into the project. Bridge Housing are a community housing provider. We are solely based in Sydney, New South Wales. We're primarily in the inner city, but also have quite a bit of housing on the northern beaches. We manage just under 4,000 homes in Sydney. This is our biggest redevelopment project. We actually tendered for the development rights for this site from the New South Wales government. So it is government land at the moment, and we are delivering it under a project delivery agreement with the government. And it's the biggest project that we have embarked on ever. Actually, before I dive into the structure, I will admit now that the 6 years of history that I've had on the project, 5 of those were actually working with the government to get the site ready to release and make it available for the CHP sector. It actually went through a transaction process, so an expression of interest that was concluded, seeking a build to rent option, so where government would retain ownership of the whole site and over a long-term lease provide build to rent housing here with a mix of social and market housing. But it was concluded at the time that the return in numbers of social homes was not enough to make it worth the government to go through that process. So then put it on the market, again seeking a development partner to sell some properties to enable the uplift in social to be higher. And so that I've taken the project through a rezoning process and 2 transactions. And then just over 12 months ago, I moved over to Bridge to be the project director to deliver it for them. So the structure of the project is, and I'm kind of happy to, this might prompt questions, so by all means put them in the chat and we can come back to this slide, is the New South Wales government contributes the land. Bridge Housing has partnered with Capella Capital to help with development management and financial and commercial structuring. And so we have partnered with Capella to bring the development expertise. Then the output and what we sell to generate revenue is a mix of key worker and disability support housing, which is sold to investors. Market homes, so there's 100 market homes in the project to sell to individuals. And the community facility part of that is grant funded, and part of that is being sold to the PCYC as an asset that they will own. And what the revenue generated by the sale of those assets gives back the social homes to government at no cost to them, and gives for Bridge the affordable housing and a new office space on site. So we're not taking profit from this project, we are taking affordable homes at the end, and we'll also have a permanent office space for us to be back in Redfern. So that's sort of the loop, is that government gets what it needs out of the project. Our return is in our core business, which is affordable housing, and we have been able to deliver a true diversity of housing along the way. So what are the benefits? For Bridge, there's no land cost. We didn't have to pay land to sign this PDA. And that was the structure that the government was putting out. Our profits are all completely reinvested back into the project and in the location in that form of affordable housing. We have control, so we are not, we are the developer. Bridge Housing, there's not an SPV, we are the developer doing all of the work here, so we have full control. We're not sitting underneath another developer just getting projects or dwellings at the end. We know what we're getting and what kind of community we're creating, and obviously in doing that, it builds our portfolio. For the government, they've contributed the land, and they are getting 30% of that housing back to them in the form of social housing. They've done that without needing to contribute any capital. Housing supply is obviously a very big issue, so they know that for their people in New South Wales, they're increasing significant numbers of just housing for all of the diverse options. And this is effectively a pilot project for them to partner with the CHP on a project of a scale like this. So they've de-risked that pilot by the fact that we've put it forward to deliver something of this scale as a CHP rather than as a for-profit developer. And what are the benefits for the community? More housing. I think this was probably something that we've sort of been slightly ahead of the game of, in that we tendered for this over 2 years ago, and so we've really seen the affordability challenge coming before it really hit, as much as the community potentially foresaw it. The community facility, the current facility is 70 years old and about 1,200 square metres. The new facility will be 3,500 square metres, so it's an incredible addition to that community at Redfern. And the use of public land is very clear. So there's generally a lot of opposition in New South Wales around government selling off public land for private purposes, but we think that as a CHP doing the delivering and with such a diversity of housing options, that it's a much clearer use and outcome for the community. I have alluded to the fact that I've worked on this project for 6 years, which, to be honest, is way too long to deliver housing on a site that's vacant and is an absolute no-brainer for should-be accommodating density. That maybe is the nature of the planning and housing system in New South Wales. If anyone's worked here, it takes a very long time to do anything in planning. And I am a planner, or I should say I was a planner, and that was one of the reasons why I'm no longer a planner, because the system drove me crazy. So it is a 6-year project and counting. 4 of those years actually took to rezone it and to allow the kind of density that we're talking about. And it's not out of context. It's short. The tallest building is shorter than some surrounding it. As I said, we're 2 kilometres from the CBD. We're opposite a park. It's an absolute no-brainer for significant density. And even since the land was rezoned, because of the complexity of the New South Wales planning system, I've had to do 3 amendments to that rezoning framework since that time, because it is so constrictive that every time something doesn't quite fit, sometimes we need to do an amendment. I needed to do a design excellence strategy, which meant that one of the buildings had to have a design competition. So even though it had been through 4 years of planning and design, I still needed to do a design competition for. We had to do an expression of interest for the community facility building, and we've had a series of panels meetings with design experts through the design prior to DA lodgement. So as a result, I have 3 separate architects to manage to deliver this project, and a landscape architect. And on top of that, kind of over 40 other consultants contributing to the design and delivery. And as I said, we've had the design review panel meetings. So one of the key things, I guess, to take is it's not an easy, it hasn't been easy. It sounds now, housing is flavour of the month. Housing has not always been flavour of the month. So maybe in the context of today, if I was lodging a rezoning proposal, it might not take 4 years, but it did take that 5 years ago. So some more of the challenges. The layers of history here are one of the reasons why it's taken some time. We have to be really respectful of the community, particularly bringing in onto a site that was once only social housing, diversity of tenant, of new occupants. It has a very layered, actually physical layered history in the ground. There's about 4 different development forms that were there. And so we've had to do 5 rounds of archaeology on the site, both European and Aboriginal archaeology. And, there was one of the first cricket grounds here. It used to be a lagoon, so there were some concerns, not concerns, but, we were cautious that there might be Aboriginal artefacts, which we haven't found. But there was, when it was the 1880s, there was a case of a family where there were baby farms, which is a really awful thing. I don't think anyone should Google it, but it made the news, and we had to investigate the footings of a particular building to look for remains. So it's been like, you can't, in the city, there are inevitably layers of both community, but actually physically in the ground, there are layers that we had to get through to make sure that we weren't disturbing anything unpleasant. That's been quite fun, albeit very time consuming. The stakeholders in an inner city location like this are they're very well educated, they're very well versed, they're advocating for people who maybe can't advocate for themselves, they're very engaged. And so we just need to keep meeting with them and engaging with them and finding out what they'd like to see. And so again, that's just been a challenge, and is quite time consuming. And the financials are an incredibly challenging component of this project. Since it was bid on and Bridge won the rights to redevelop, the market has shifted significantly, primarily in construction costs. I think that's probably a common issue across all of Australia. And it does mean that the balance of what we need to sell to make sure we get back what government and what Bridge need to earn to get those assets back becomes more and more challenging. And so, we've had to explore that. And I'll get to, there's a slide at the end that talks to where we're heading with that direction. What has made this work? It's been time consuming. Murray said at the beginning, I seem like I'm passionate and I still have energy for a project I've worked on for 6 years, and I do, and this is why. For me with Bridge, and why did I move from government a year ago over to Bridge to deliver a project, is Bridge had such a clear vision that stood out significantly to any other bid that came in when it went to market. It was a massive jump going up to such a large number of homes, but no one else was really thinking about the diversity of housing and how that could be managed within a site like this and with a location like this. And I think their vision was just very, very strong. They partnered with the right people, and I in particular call out Capella as they do lots of PPPs on social infrastructure, but not in Victoria do a lot with Homes Vic, but so they were a great partner for Bridge to help with the structuring and the finance and the development management, like boosting our abilities, in that we acknowledged what we didn't have and the kind of partners that we need to fill those gaps. And I think that's just a consistent message, as CHPs are growing, we don't always have what we need in our business at that time. So how do we find the right partners to fill those gaps and build the capacity as we're growing? Honesty. I think we've just needed to have everything on the table. These are the challenges of being a CHP developer. I love working in housing and development, and I think it's an easier conversation to have with any stakeholder, council, state government, when you're a CHP, because you can kind of cry poor, and I don't mean that in like a bad way, but that's what we're doing. We're providing housing. All of our profit goes back into service provision. And so, you know, we're not making profit and running away from this community. And so I find it's a really easy, honest conversation to have about the challenges and why we need certain stakeholders to help. And the final is why this works for Bridge so much is the authenticity of the project and its location made it worth Bridge's time, effort, and money. You know, Bridge is funding a lot of this project before we hit financial close with our investors out of its own pocket. Like as I said, it's a Bridge funded and delivered project. It's not an SPV at this point in time. And so what made this project work was it's in our heartland. It's where Bridge started. It's where our community and connections are. Again, it really helps with the honesty of conversation, why we're here, why we're fighting for density, having those challenging planning conversations, because it actually is a very meaningful site and project for us. So that really is the essence of Redfern. I think some quick key learnings, and then I'll kind of shock you with the direction the project's heading in, hopefully, is if you're working in a city project, they take time. So be patient. Maybe have more than one project on at a time, so you've got some things to kind of bounce between. Input, as I kind of called out the role of Capella, invest in the right team, both internally and externally. You don't need to have everything in-house all the time, particularly with development. It is so lumpy. I think for us, what worked is the vision that Bridge had in the location that really resonated. And we try to just keep focused on who the community is at Redfern, and so why we're doing what we're doing when things get quite challenging. So I've alluded to potentially a change. So before I go to the next slide, it was on that structure that is our base case. Like that is what we will deliver at Redfern unless we are successful for a half bid that we have gone for. So I'm sure it won't surprise anyone. And I'm sure many of you have potentially gone for half bids, but we actually proposed and have sought funding to convert the whole project to social and affordable housing. So rather than rely on the sale of the market units, the key worker units and the SDA units, that actually we would convert that market and key worker building into affordable housing and allow us to deliver 350 social and affordable homes in the inner city. We're still waiting, I'm guessing like potentially many of you, as to the outcome, but this is now our preferred direction, and hopefully we hear shortly that it's been supported. Otherwise, if not, we go back. We don't think that's a bad outcome. We're still very committed to the diverse housing options, but we see the housing crisis and the need for social and affordable as significant in this location, and so we'd like to actually increase the stock much more significantly, the social and affordable housing much more significantly than the base case. To that, I sort of leave that to the end because the whole everything else is the same other than the tenure. So a couple of other things that Bridge are, I'd say, currently exploring. We have other projects, but I thought it might be of interest to show what other opportunities there are for CHPs in Sydney at the moment that might there might be similar sites and similar opportunities in Queensland, and they might kind of spark a thought for some of you. So first of all, the New South Wales government has just done its biggest announcement, its biggest budget commitment to social and affordable housing in my entire housing experience, and probably for at least the last 20 years, with $5.1 billion towards social housing delivery over the next 4 years. and identifying sites, government land, to deliver 21,000 affordable homes in New South Wales. So, you know, it's kind of naff, but it's never been a better time to work in social and affordable housing in New South Wales before, and I'm sort of grateful to be here. And some of the other options that sites, I should say, that are out there and that Bridge specifically are looking at, these are not active projects. I just sort of wanted to spark some thoughts with you. So on the back of Redfern, and with the opportunity with Housing Australia, the same government agency that we've partnered with to deliver Redfern is releasing more sites only to CHPs to deliver like Bridge is delivering at Redfern. So we were the pilot that they didn't ask for, but they've now used a lot of those assumptions and a lot of that structure to then identify other sites that could be CHP developer led. So these sites, the government has gone to Housing Australia to get funding for. They are seeking the planning consent. So the project will come to a CHP with planning approval. The CHP will take over the site, do the detailed design, engage a builder, confirm the financing, and then manage the construction. It'll be 50-50 social and affordable. The social will be government owned, the affordable will be CHP owned and managed as one by the CHP. So there's a few examples of sites like that the government's releasing. The other options that Bridge are looking at are land that we control or manage ourselves. And so starting from nothing really is, what are the controls? What are we able to do? How would we finance that? And as part of the New South Wales government's desire to planning reforms for housing supply, they've identified sites around train stations and local centres and other accessible locations for uplift, and just rezoning them as a statewide policy. If you're within 400 metres of a train station, you can get a 2.5 to 1 FSR and a certain height. And so where our sites do benefit from that, so we're able now to have a look at, like, where are they? Is that somewhere we could provide housing? Do we have the finance to actually start that process before we get an investor involved? And so we're having a look at some of those sites. This one is right on top of a train station. At the top, you can see the station down the bottom, and this site is on the northern beaches. You can see the lagoon on one side and the beach on the other, like absolute prime, amazing opportunities for us to explore. And the third option that's currently out that we're having a look at is, there's one council in Sydney who has put to market 3 at-grade car parks. Now these are, like, car parks are notoriously challenging sites to redevelop, but this council wants to see the car park renewed, affordable housing on top. It's a 99-year lease. They want the CHP to take the site and act as the developer. They've asked for what kind of funding the council might need to contribute to help replace the car park. And so then the CHP would run the design, planning, tendering and delivery, and then management phase. So I thought this is something that I'm actively looking at right now. And I thought, if any of you, I'm not sure if there's councils in the room, but just as an option is, if you have land, there are other parties exploring different ways to put these things to market and partner with CHPs, either potentially as a future opportunity, but not necessarily. So we're looking at, well, what would this be if HAF wasn't an option on this site? Would something still stack up? I think that was it for me. Oh, sorry, yes, the last. I'm just really conscious of, we're in a space of potentially too many opportunities, and how do you focus your time and effort? And that capacity is just still to be developed as we go along. So, in the industry, and when the Housing Australia announces their shortlist and projects start coming up out of the ground, is how can the construction industry keep up? I think that's going to be a massive challenge over the next 5+ years, and with an aim of not providing so much demand that we just keep increasing cost of housing along the way for everyone else who's trying to contribute in the market. In the financials, like just as a CHP, we need to work out how many projects we can comfortably take on and what that debt looks like and who our partners are. And then within our own business is how fast can we grow? There's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot that we would like to do, but are there the people in the industry able to come and join us to help us do that? And on projects that have partners, like who has the capacity to take the risk, like the car park site is a great example. What's in the ground there? Who's going to take that risk? Is it us? Is it them? Who has the finances to kind of back up that risk and support it? So yeah, there's just that's just something that's a really personal perspective of there's opportunities everywhere, but do we have the capacity to deliver on them all, and how do we prioritize our time and effort? That's it from me.
Thank you so much, Lindsey. That was really great. Really, really insightful. And I loved the one with like the vision, partnerships, and really highlighting how there were so many different ingredients to pull the Redfern project together. We've got a bit of time now. If anyone had any questions or even just thoughts and comments, yeah, just open it up, just jump in, just take yourself off mute if you'd like to ask a question.
I have a question, if it's okay, if I jump
in
and ask. I had a couple of questions. Thanks, Lindsey. That was really awesome, really interesting, and sounds like some great projects. So thank you so much for going through that, and really interesting to hear what's happening in your state and the challenges, which I think there's a lot of commonality there. I had a question just around the scenario that you're kind of looking at the moment, where the New South Wales government is potentially releasing land, but then they also, get the planning approvals in place, which sounds like a positive thing, if it's going to fast track approvals. But how does that sit with you from I guess making sure that what they get approved is, fit for purpose, or your business? Like how are you thinking that will be managed?
Look, I'm a little bit biased because that's where I used to work. But the Homes New South Wales have a very good set of design guidelines. It's called Design Requirements for Social Housing in New South Wales. They're not very different, to be honest, to what I think is good affordable housing as well. As maybe you would slightly up spec some elements within an affordable home. But the actual layout and guidance behind them is very strong. And the Apartment Design Guide, which is a state government guideline for apartment, all kinds of apartment, social, affordable and market, also exists. So they're designing within that guideline as well. So in reality, even now as I'm designing Redfern, I'm actually generally telling my architects on the affordable housing is the cleanest, simplest design guideline is the New South Wales government's own guidelines for social housing. So in terms of like apartment layout, size, efficiencies, amenity, I actually don't have many concerns. In terms of, is it the design I would deliver, and is it going to be an efficient transition between a design done by an architect for a government client and then taking it through detailed design to get a tender doc and then engage a builder? That's where I'm a little bit more nervous, and I probably preempt that we'll take consent, which will be great to have, but I'll need to modify it to make sure it's efficient and cost effective through construction methodology, more so than the layout issue. So I wouldn't expect that we'll need to redesign to get uplift, but has their architect, who probably hasn't, I know they don't have a builder engaged to give them that input. There inevitably will be construction issues that will probably result in requirements to facade or elevations and then need modifications. And so I guess I'm just prepared that that's the case, but better to have consent, as you say, there's time saving there and the yield locked in, And then really it'd only be through the tender documentation phase, and hopefully I can have a contractor reviewing the plans at that point. And then when we tender it, that it'll become really clear where we need to make the amendment. I'd love to be in the tent and be kind of working with them now, but I'm not complaining either to potentially get a site with consent on it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And my second question was just around the council car park arrangement and the requirement to, I guess, deliver car parking back. So I know that, that's been sort of something that has been considered on a few different things, like Queensland Rail sites and other things, but historically probably a while ago. And it used to fall over back then when we were at $50,000 a car park, and now we're at, well, here in Queensland, we're probably closer to $150,000 for a basement car park. Just wondering whether, those metrics have been looked at and how you think, whether you think it's actually workable.
Well, it depends how much cash council can contribute to the project. So it's not I don't believe it's going to be workable without any contribution. I certainly don't think it's going to be workable without council taking the risk on what's in the ground in particular as well. And maybe the number that they're initially asking for doesn't actually get delivered back. Are they asking for too many if it's about replacement? So no, I think you've hit it. It's an expensive asset to replace, particularly as it typically has to all be in the ground. But I still think they're great sites, and they will get, call it 50 affordable homes within the planning controls. And so I still think they're worth exploring. Whether or not council sees the response back and agrees potentially the loss of parking. I mean, those particular sites are in inner city location. Like in reality, they're 5 to 8 kilometres out from the CBD. What's more important to us at the moment, is it 40 car spaces or is it 50 homes? That's the kind of conversation that council should be thinking about now.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. That all makes sense.
I can throw a question your way, Lindsay, which would just be interesting if you can share with us. So in terms of the design and planning for the project, what changed when it sort of moved from your original brief to then obviously acknowledging Huff and repositioning for that? Was there a few sort of key things? I assume there would have been, and can we have a bit of your insight into that?
Yeah, well, actually, what Greta just mentioned was probably one of the fundamental changes, which is the amount of parking that we're proposing. So with 200 odd or 180 market and key worker homes, we were designing to, I'm trying to remember now, maybe it was closer to 180 car spaces within a basement, which was primarily like across the whole site needed a basement. We've now, the basement shrunk, we're only providing 66 car spaces within the basement. So that's a massive change in the ground and in the cost of the project. And absolutely the site can sustain that. That might sound like a really small number, 66 for 350 homes. But, walking distance to Redfern Station, which is only one stop from Central Station in Sydney CBD. Same walking distance to a new metro line at Waterloo on a bus route, like very, very accessible. Other changes internally are really just shrinking the apartment sizes. I mentioned the apartment design guide in New South Wales. It has minimum sizes anyway, and so our social homes and our affordable homes, we really just try to get down to that minimum size that we're allowed to do, and still achieving solar access and cross ventilation are the two key things that really guide the kind of density you can get. Where in the market, we're probably looking at 10% above minimums. And so that's really why we went from 340 homes to 355 was the drive. We were able to get more homes out of that. The spec is different in terms of, finishings within the units will be different, which can save us some money. One thing that didn't change though, I guess, is the quality of the facade and the design is the external buildings has been pretty consistent, and the communal facilities we've kept really consistent. So each of the buildings have rooftop terraces. The larger of the 3 buildings actually has a whole floor. Our level 10, which is the main component of the building, it has a little section with 4 stories above that. Our level 10 is solely communal. If anything, we've probably put a bit more thought into what that is as an affordable building. You know, that the units are smaller, so what can we provide on that terrace, both internal and external facilities. But we're really conscious of keeping the quality of the design and architecture in this. It's a really very, very visually prominent location opposite the Oval and Park. So, you know, we needed to keep the architecture high-end. Sorry, high-end isn't the right word. It's not expensive spec, but it's still very good design.
Great. Any other questions?
There's one other, I'm just sort of waiting to see if another person's mic, I think Tom's mic's just come off. I just want to double check first. No, we're good. Awesome. And it might even just be a little bit more of a reflection from my sort of position with the Community Housing Futures program, but it really sort of struck me when you were talking about going through this process and then the design competition element. And I mean, you talked about having 40+ consultants engaged and I guess acknowledging the diversity and scale and I guess uniqueness of this project too, given the location. But just in terms of a design competition, that's a bit new to me, like in terms of, and I don't know if there's anything, I have a look at the time, we're kind of nearly at time, but is there sort of, just for people like me here that may not have come across that at this kind of scale, do you have any kind of key reflections or anything that you can kind of add around that? Or maybe we can even take it offline, but just that in terms of design competition and the level of engagement you've had around that and how you've actually facilitated that through this project. I'd be really eager to kind of have a little bit of your time over. Yeah.
I'm happy, Murray, afterwards to have a chat, but like the short form version is if you don't have to do one, don't do one. Initially, they cost money because you pay every participant to contribute. And secondly, you get the panel of architects. In some instances, you don't even get to control everyone who is even it goes to, so that depends how you've negotiated that. You want to make sure you get your fee lined up before you confirm who your architects are. So all those architects who do a competition, you want to make sure they've seen your contract and you know what their fee is before you confirm that they are one who is going to actually do a competition response. Because if they win, that's the fee that you pay. So you don't want to do a competition without knowing what the fee is for that particular architect. And yeah, just try not to do them. It's probably I mean, you get to write a brief. You do get to write a brief. You can include your construction budget in that brief. You can include how many dwellings you want and whatever. But, you know, then once they've gone through a competition in New South Wales, and I don't know whether they do comps in Queensland, but it's called an integrity process afterwards. So the comp is a winning comp because of, you know, 10 different reasons. Those 10 different reasons need to stay with the project. So at the end, what gets approved is still, I'm still going to use the wrong term. It has the integrity of the original competition winning design. So you might not love all those elements that someone else on an external panel said, oh, we love it because it's, I don't know, 7-star green star rating. I mean, that's not going to happen, but like it's going to be an element in there. You might not love that, but that bit, if it's written up as why it won the competition, you've got to keep that in the end. And you know, competitions potentially are great for market housing because you can sell it at the end. It's a competition winning design, blah, 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 all these things. You're not making money from affordable and social housing. So yeah, I think if you can avoid it, don't do it.
Thanks, Lindsay. So we've come to 2:45. If people need to head off now, please do. Otherwise, if anyone's got any burning questions, we can hang around for a couple more minutes.
I'll ask another question if no one else
sure.
is going to. Lindsay, just with big projects like the one in Redfern that you've described, in terms of your modelling of the project, so through the development phase and obviously taking into account the operational phase and that sort of stuff, do you use a state master? Do you have a bespoke model, or is that where you use your partner to help?
Well, I guess it's all of the above. Is that there's some projects that we definitely use a state master for, and where I think it's definitely a smaller project is better for us, and we can make some assumptions about ongoing yield over a certain period of time. We absolutely have bespoke models. Redfern is a bespoke model, and our partner has helped build that bespoke model for us. The HAF model, we both had a look at what Housing Australia provided as the pack, but then we chose to proceed with a bespoke model for our HAF projects as well. So that is not as I said, I've come from planning, so I'm much more in design and upfront delivery, and I'm very happy to have an expert who's running and updating the FISO model based on the scenarios and things that I need tested.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Greta.
Thank you.
We might wrap it up then. Thank you so much for your time, Lindsay. Such a wealth of information, and we'll be sure to send out your slides, and if you're happy, Lindsay, to share your contact as well so people can ask any other questions. But yeah, thanks so much, and we'll see you at the next Filling the Pulse, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Cheers.
everyone.
Bye.